What's up, folks? It's Dr. Remy LeBeau, and I'm coming at you once again from the X-Lair to provide you my insightful thoughts on the latest episode of an X-Men ongoing television show by the name of The Gifted. This was The Gifted Season 1, Episode 3. Alright, well, here I go. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't terribly excited by the episode. It felt like it was starting to become what I was sort of afraid the show would become, which is more of like that kind of scripted television sort of quality, which is not what the first couple of episodes offered. And the reason for that was because, of course, you had two film directors direct those two episodes. This was directed by a sort of standard director, standard film television director, and you can tell by the quality of the episode. As far as like the production of the episode, I'm not saying anything about like what actually happened within the episode. I'm talking about the overall quality. It didn't feel cinematic. It felt more like a television drama. And there's nothing wrong with that ultimately, but that is the reason why a lot of like superhero shows wind up falling flat for me, and overall wind up falling flat because they don't sort of maintain a consistency in terms of like artistic quality, and fall into the television trap of just trying to like produce episodes. That is not the case whatsoever with Legion, right? Legion was produced by FX. It was, I think, 8 episodes long, and the quality of the entire run was consistent. It was an artistic depiction of the X-Men world with a very particular point of view from start to finish. It's a very special show, and I highly look forward to season 2. I cannot wait till season 2 comes out and sort of see where they're going to go with it, and if they're going to maintain the kind of quality and approach that they had with the first season, which I think they will, because this guy Noah Harley, I think his name is, the guy that did the Fargo show, who did Legion. I think he's committed to kind of making Legion something special, and I respect that. I'm afraid that this show, The Gifted, is not going to have that quality. Does that mean it's going to be a bad show? No. But it might ultimately put it in that category of like shows that can be watched or not watched by the general audience. And so if it becomes that, then it could easily wind up getting canceled by Fox. So that's ultimately my main concern. It's like you're gonna tease us with like an ongoing X-Men show, and then if you're not gonna give it the kind of resources and artistic vision that it deserves, then it could wind up just becoming any old television show that any average viewer can just easily just ignore, and ultimately, if enough of that happens, it will be its demise. That's what I'm concerned about, folks. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't want that to happen. I hate when that happens. I hate getting invested in a show that gets canceled. That's probably the worst thing ever. And if that were to happen to an X-Men show, I would freaking be very angry. And I don't want that to happen. Anyway, those are my thoughts as far as like what's going on with the production. All right, what happened in the actual episode? Some good stuff. We had the stuff happened with the Strucker father, which was interesting. I did feel like I didn't quite like this turn that the father was making in the end of the last episode. Willing to give up the Mutant Underground in order to save his family, and his sort of journey of like kind of realizing that he's part of something bigger, and that it's not just his family that's involved, but there are other families, and for him to give up his family to sacrifice these other families is not right. And he and that came off clearly in his action when he sort of jumped out of the van and gave up that sting operation. So that's a good thing, that's a great thing, because I want to like that character. I don't want him to be a character that I grow to dislike, because first of all, the actor's awesome, and second of all, like the family, I think ultimately should be one unit, and that sort of action of like giving up the Mutant Underground for the family could have led to a schism within the family. And the family appears to be sort of the heart of the show. So that stuff was good. I liked that scene at the beginning with Lorna And the guy's name is Eclipse, I guess. That's the name of this character they made up for the show. That took place 3 years prior. It explained the existence of the Mutant Underground facility. The fact that it is going on, it goes under the radar because I guess there was an orphanage, a mutant orphanage, where there was some sort of incident that caused all sorts of destruction in the area, and so people tend to stay away from the area. And that is what allows them to kind of stay under the radar. So that was well explained. I like that. I liked Lorna flying. That was really cool. I liked the interaction between Lorna and this Eclipse guy and how it causes like an aurora borealis sort of effect. That's really cool as well. So I like that stuff. The stuff with the Strucker family that is together looking to, I guess, meet up with, I think it's the mom's brother is what it is what the relationship is there. That was sort of okay, you know, it wasn't that great of a sort of story arc in this episode for that family. Because it just like I mean, realistically, if this were actually happening, right? Like the family, like she would understand the severity of the situation, and she would not go out and trust, you know, that there are other people out there that would be willing to harbor her secret or even put her family in that kind of compromised position where, like, you know, if they're found out, then they could wind up going to prison themselves, simply for helping them. So I just didn't feel like that was something that that would normally happen, you know. But it was more of like, well, we need something to happen, so let's just make that happen, you know. That's sort of what it felt like to me. So none of that stuff was really interesting to me, except of course finally when the Mutant Underground, Warpath and Eclipse show up. Not Warpath, Thunderbird. It's not Warpath, it's Thunderbird. When they show up at the house, and then you have this like mob of like neighbors or whatever that are like coming after the mutants. That stuff I did like, because that is very sort of reminiscent of just like the X-Men world, right? Where like regular old people fear and hate mutants enough to the point where they're willing to kind of like have like this like militia type of mentality, galvanize them into action, as we saw, getting them to the point where they're able to kind of cross lines, ethical lines, when it comes to interactions with mutants, because mutants in their mind are below them, and they therefore deserve to be treated as subhuman, you know. So all that stuff resonated well. The shattering of that door was kind of cool by the kid. I'm really starting to like this kid. Like his powers are really intense, and that was really kind of cool to see his display of power there, and also earlier with the meter maid destruction, so that they can get the money for the cab. So that stuff was cool. What was of interest to me most was this other mutant that's in the Mutant Underground, this redheaded girl. At first, for some reason, like I thought John called her Rach, and she was implying that she could, you know, put memories in people's minds. And I was thinking, is this like Rachel Summers? Like, is she like a psychic? And obviously Rachel Summers is a telekinetic, but also a psychic, and so she can get into people's minds. So for a second I thought that was who she was. It turns out she's not. They didn't tell her name in the episode, but she apparently can change people's memories, right? I mean, that's the most we know so far. And it involves some sort of mist that comes out of her, which was kind of interesting. Reminiscent of Poison Ivy in Batman and Robin. I know that's a terrible reference, but that did kind of remind me of like that, when Poison Ivy was kind of spreading her pollen. I don't know how I feel about this character, having seen, you know, how her powers work, and the fact that she's not Rachel Summers. Again, it's more of that whole, like, is she a new mutant that's been created for the show thing, where it's like, well, I appreciate that you guys are taking creative sort of latitude with this show. But again, like, you're dealing in X-Men canon where there's so many characters to pull from and tell stories about that exist in X-Men canon, you know. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe she does exist in X-Men canon. I am an expert, but I don't know every character. Because, you know, there were certain storylines I didn't really follow closely, like all this stuff with the younger mutants throughout the years. After Generation X, they had like a few other young teams, and like a lot of the young people in those teams I'm not 100% familiar with. So maybe she is part of canon, I don't know. But if she's not, again, I feel like they're taking a little bit too much, too many liberties in creating characters for the show. Whereas what they could be doing is just like giving us some cool representations of characters that we're all familiar with already. But again, that's just that's a fanboy type of perspective on it, and ultimately this show is meant for everybody, not just us like hardcore fans. And I'm willing to let it kind of play itself out with these new characters and see where it goes, because I am starting to I like this Eclipse guy, I like the kids, this guy with like a crack on his face, this like black faced guy with a crack in the Mutant Underground that they haven't really talked about. He looks really cool. There's like some really cool looks to the characters, but again, like who they are ultimately, and whether or not they are worthy of the X-Men universe is up in the air, and I'm willing to let the season play out and see if they are worthy. Again, I'm a little bit concerned about the quality of the show, and like if it's gonna like kind of like strike enough interest in the general audience to keep it alive and keep it going, and ultimately get it to places that they're probably interested in going. But I do feel like at this point it's still a mixed bag. I'm not 100% sold on this show being a success. I like it, of course. I'm an X-Men fan, for God's sake. You know, and this is an X-Men show. I like the show. Do I love the show? No, I don't love the show. You know, I don't look forward to it in the way that I look forward to some of my favorite shows. And so for it to get me to that level, it's going to have to step it up a bit. It might. I don't doubt that it still could. But for now, I'm still a little bit hesitant. I did like all the stuff with Clarice, Blink. The fact that she got that tattoo over her eye, which is part of the iconography of her character in the comics. I didn't realize that had emerged last episode, but it did. That's cool. Still a little bit sort of iffy on like this whole storyline of like, I don't know if I can use my powers or not. But I'm willing to go with it. The fact that this other mutant gave her this weird memory of her being in love with James is a plot device to create some drama between characters. That's cool-ish, but I don't know. We'll see if that plays out well. It's still like, obviously the show is starting out. It's trying to sort of find its footing, and I appreciate it, and I'm willing to give it, of course, as much time as it needs. But again, it's ultimately about the general audience. Will they give it the right amount of time for it to thrive and for it to find the elements of it that are worthy of the X-Men universe and become ultimately popular, ideally, and catapult the show into a status that it would need to be in order for it to last, you know, because that's what we want. That's what I want. That's what everybody wants. We want a show like this to last. And if it fails, then I mean, when are we going to get another good X-Men show, right? I mean, Legion is its own thing, but like, will they take more chances with the X-Men universe, you know? So we'll see. You know, I don't like Gotham at all. I gave it a chance all the way through, I think, the middle of the third season, last season, I think. I think this is the fourth season they're airing now. It just, like, they tried something, you know, they did a sort of kind of periphery story around the Batman world, and for me, it just didn't work. I mean, I know it's still airing, but it's just overall, I don't feel like it worked, and this is sort of a similar approach where they're not focusing on like what we know about the world, but they're like telling stories in the periphery of it, and that could or could not, wind up being a disaster. Again, right now it's looking okay. It was looking pretty good the first couple episodes. Based on this episode, it's looking all right. But I mean, obviously, you're always going to have a lull in the middle of a big story. If this is a 10-episode arc, then it makes sense that you're going to have some filler kind of stuff. And this other element that's popping up with this doctor who's interested in like the twins or like the brother and sister is of interest as well. Obviously, that's going to play out in an interesting way. So we'll see where that goes. Obviously, as far as like the character itself and its root in canon, that is questionable. So I don't know where this character is coming from either. That doesn't mean that like that these elements need to necessarily tie into the comics. But again, there are characters in the comics that can be used. And so again, if you're telling completely different stories than what has come before, then you may as well not call it. You may as well not say that it's a show within the X-Men world. Just call it something else and just tell a different story, and that's fine. But if you're going to use the X-Men world, if you're going to talk about the X-Men, if you're going to talk about mutants, then root it firmly in that world, because that world is successful. And so if you want the show to be successful, you want to make it as much of that world as possible. I understand that, like, as a film studio, Fox is also kind of saving the big players for the films. And I recognize that. But if you're going to invest time and effort into a television show set in the same world, then I'm sorry, but you're going to have to give us a little bit more of what that world, of the familiarity of that world, of what it is that makes that world popular to begin with. So I hope we're going to see more of that, and I hope we'll see bigger shows of power moving forward as well. We had a couple of big sequences in the first couple episodes, but now that we're in this third episode and this television director took the reins, like, there wasn't a big sequence in it that like really kind of left me wanting more, and knowing that the show is always going to be willing to go pretty far in like the representation of the powers and the kind of interesting action sequences that can result from that. So I hope that I hope that the show winds up being a hybrid of like the first couple of episodes, right? And not just, again, having that normal television feel. Anyway, overall, like the show. Definitely going to keep watching it. And I'm crossing my fingers for it. I am crossing my fingers for it in 2X formations, ladies and gentlemen. All right, folks. Thanks for checking out my videos. Thanks for checking out my YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, you can do so down there and check out some other stuff that I upload every now and then when I feel the tickle and the fancy. Of course, I always want to remind you that if you haven't already, you better put an X in that box, right here, X, in that box, ladies and gentlemen, because, well, nobody's going to check me, okay? Nobody's going to fucking check me, motherfucker. I'm kidding. I love y'all. Take care and goodbye.